Next slide. So this man had a history of backache for almost a year and then had cough and mild SOB in June 2020, got an X-ray done locally, and then there was a therapeutic pleural fluid tapping done which showed the cytology is positive. He went to a local oncology center and was then told to go to an institute. Next slide. And that's where we came in the picture. He at that time when he came to have severe back pain impending paraparesis in July 2020 for further management. Next slide. And so we since we had the pleural fluid report, we got his whole body PET scan done on 7th of July this year showing a left lung upper lobe mass. Next slide. Pleural based and lung parenchymal lesions. Next slide. Mediastinal lymph nodes. Next slide. Segment 3 liver lesion. Next slide. And then there was a kidney lesion as well. Left renal cortex lesion. Next slide. And then vertebral metastasis. The D10 lesion there was causing the paraparesis and severe back pain, iliac bone lesion and a D12 lesion also. Next slide. So my question to for instance, Sadashiv, in your practice, is there any patient at any stage for whom you don't insist on a PET scan at baseline?
Yes, actually, if we did not do any other investigations like bone scan and CT scan, people, most of them, they'll come up with all the investigations. If they have done already CECT chest up to the abdomen, what you call adrenals, and the bone scan suggests of multiple metastasis. Again, I don't want to do the PET CT at that point of time.
Right.
Yes.
So since we have a lot of DM residents also, so I thought that maybe this question might help us in giving a take-home message to all of them. Next slide. If you look at the NCCN guidelines, the patient underwent a CT at FNAC and biopsy of the left lung mass, and the cytopathology came as non-small cell lung cancer. The radiation in the G10 area also started because the patient has severe pain. Now the NCCN guidelines tell us that a whole body PET scan possibly is almost now a routine across all stages from stage 1 to stage 4. Though in clinical practice, we might have some differences. Next slide. So now this patient had impending paraparesis. So if we have a surgical oncologist on board or a radiation oncologist on board, maybe anyone can take the question. Now, with this cord compression, how do we decide to start palliative RT or should we go for surgical decompression?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, please.
Yeah, so if the patient has paraparesis of recent onset due to a vertebral net which is compressing the spinal cord, can you hear
Yes,
me?
madam.
Yeah, so if it is of recent onset and the patient has not already had a long onset paraparesis, you should consider surgical decompression. But if already he has lost power in the limb and there is wasting and everything, then surgical decompression will most probably not help.
So I think it's more of a clinical judgment for all of us, and that's what we do in practice as well. Now, for this patient in July 2020, with the COVID pandemic going on, the surgical decompression option was not chosen, and we went on to go with palliative radiation therapy with denosumab and steroids. Next slide. And then the biopsy report came as non-small cell lung cancer adenocarcinoma grade 2. The MRI brain was done, which was showing no abnormality at all. So Ullas, can you just answer this question? Next slide. So is there any patient for whom we don't get MRI brain done across any stage of non-small cell lung cancer in your practice?
So, previously, let's say if the patient is an asymptomatic patient, smoker, previously we were not getting an MRI brain done, but right now I think we are going to get an MRI brain done. Okay. It is important because if just in case it's an oncogene driver, then your choice of treatment, in ALK and EGFR differs. And with more and more use of radiotherapy and stereotactic radiotherapy, SBRT, I think it is better to get an MRI brain.
Absolutely. I think that was the main reason we got the MRI brain also done. If you look at
Dattatreya, can I make a point, Dr. Shyam Agarwal?
Please, sir.
So I have exactly similar patient the way you have described. So the issue was on the kidney lesion. So
Yes.
do we do a biopsy or FNAC from there to see whether this is another primary or a secondary from lung cancer?
Okay, so what we therefore did was the pleural fluid was positive, and therefore we went ahead to get the lung biopsy and the FNAC done, and that confirmed NSCLC adenocarcinoma. Sadashivu sir, what do you say about tackling the renal cortex lesion by doing a biopsy there?
It's very difficult question, sir, because so
I know.
yeah, it's a theoretically I think we can say that when we have to just do the at least try FNAC to rule out any second primary or second primary. But it's very lung tumor metastasized to kidney is very rare actually. Adrenal
So
is okay.
perfect.
Adrenal
Yes,
is
so
okay, but not
completely
the
agree with
kidney.
you, sir.
So,
Oh.
Datta, let me just say this. So, in this particular patient of mine, I did the FNAC from all three sites, and they were all consistent with lung cancer metastatic disease. So,
Right.
if you do not do the FNAC from the bone, so you're not sure what is the source of metastasis.
Absolutely.
So the issue was how to resolve this. So the ideal way is to do biopsy or FNAC from all three sites to establish the nature of the lesion at three sites.
Yes, sir. Completely agree.
Thank you.
Next, thank you, sir. Next slide, please. So the sons wanted to get the mutation testing as early as possible, and so we went with the following investigations. Next slide. The EGFR core prime was done, and the report usually comes in say 24 hours, and it found no mutations at all. So next two slides. Next slide. So this is all the mutations or the hotspots, the mutation that EGFR core prime covers. In fact, there are around 42 in number. Next slide. And then we got the ALK done, which came negative by IHC. Next slide. The ROS1 came positive, the score came as 130, and then according to this report, if it's more than 100, then it's like ROS1 IHC is positive. Next slide. And then we got the PDL1 also done with the SP263 Ventana platform, and it showed the tumor cell score of 30%. Next slide. So this is a data from 2018 showing if IHC negative and FISH positive for ALK, then crizotinib gives you a 62% response rate, and IHC positive and FISH negative, crizo gives you a 100% response rate. Next slide. 2019 May, this is IHC, NGS, and FISH. No difference in response rates, DCR or PFS across all three groups with regard to crizotinib in ALK positive non-small cell lung cancer. Next slide. And lastly, 2020 data, again NGS or IHC. By and large, if IHC is positive, the median PFS is 13 months and the response rate is more than 90%. Next slide. So, Nidhi madam, I put this patient on crizotinib 250 mg twice daily with food, and so am I right or am I wrong? Okay, Shyam Agarwal sir, can you take that question?
So can you repeat that?
So this patient goes on crizotinib 250 mg twice daily with food. Am I right or am I wrong, sir?
For ALK positive, I think should be all right.
Yeah, so actually, I slightly wanted to dissuade you or the panelists. What happened was that the ALK was negative and the ROS1 IHC had come positive, sir. And then I showed some
Can I
data
come in?
of ALK and crizotinib. Ullas, please tell me.
So I think you have your ALK was negative by IHC
Absolutely.
and ROS was positive by IHC.
Yes.
So you should confirm ROS by FISH.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing, which I think is twice daily with food. So give a gap.
Yes.
So I think the point here is you should confirm the ROS1 by FISH.
Yes.
And then probably if the FISH is positive, then you go ahead with crizotinib.
Yeah, completely agree. Shyamar also, I was just trying to slightly play with the ALK and then trying to slightly go to a tangent. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I agree with what Ullas is saying, that you need to have a confirmation by either NGS or by FISH for the ROS1. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You are dealing with the Corona capital of India. Okay, you don't take panga with Dr. Shyam Agarwal.
Next slide, please. So based on the data we have, there's an 83 to 100% chance that the FISH will come positive for the ROS1 rearrangement. And that was the reason why we thought we'll put the patient on crizotinib. And then there is data or case reports of crizotinib working even if IHC is positive but FISH is negative. Having said that, we did get the FISH done. Next slide. That patient did show improvement with the crizotinib. But then the patient was also on steroids. Next slide. Therefore, maybe it was like the crizo was working. Next slide. Or the steroids actually were producing the symptomatic relief. Next slide. And the next slide. So the expert consensus at Shyam Agarwal sir and Ullas, both of them mentioned that ROS1-IS is only a screening test, and we need to confirm that by doing a molecular or a FISH method. Next slide. And the FISH, as Ullas and Shyam Agarwal mentioned, it actually came negative.
So Dattatreya,
The FISH was negative, and therefore crizotinib should not have been started. Agarwal sir, please.
The problem is if you don't have tissue left for doing NGS or FISH, and if you have IHC ROS1 positive and you have a sick patient in front of you, what do you do?
So that was the main premise why, as you rightly said, sir, in this patient, we went on to start the crizotinib. Because there is the sensitivity is 100% and specificity is more than 83 or 85%. And the patient was sick and the family was tense. But then at the end of it, the FISH came negative and crizo didn't actually help. Next slide.
There are DM and DNB super specialist students who are watching this. I don't know, sir. Just starting, on somebody on the basis of IHC report.
You're completely right.
So let us say my correlate to that is, sir, you started among crizotinib on the basis of IHC report. Patient develops fulminant hepatitis, which is known to occur with 5% of people with this. Then what? So I would probably not really start the patient on the basis of IHC report only. Sir.
Completely agree, because ideally IHC is screening test only, and for ROS1 you need to get the FISH done before you jump onto treatment. Yeah. Anyway, the patient finished fractions of radiation and then his pulmonary symptoms worsened. He had fever too. Next slide.
Yeah, 1 second. Ullas and Dattatreya, I think in a sick patient, documentation would be the trick. We explain everything to the family and document that perhaps you're not fit for chemo, and that's the only chance you have, I guess. So you really have to individualize, I think.
Yep.
Okay, sir. Point well taken. So next slide.
Sir, because the patient is symptomatic, can't we start that chemotherapy in this case?
Satya, can
because patient is symptomatic.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Satya, this is 18 July. I hope you have got a COVID testing done for this patient.
So the next slide actually tells you that he was actually COVID positive on the 8th, after 8th fraction.
I told you we are the COVID capital.
His symptoms worsened. He had fever. We got the CT done on 18 July after 8 fractions of RT. When his pain, etc., came down, we landed up in COVID pneumonitis. Next slide. Now, since the back pain had reduced, so we stopped with the radiation therapy. Now, do we have a radiation oncology colleague on board? Like Sandeep Ganguly sir or Nidhi Patni madam, can you, next slide please. So
I'm here.
Radiation oncology colleague was, next slide, 2 questions in fact, one by one, next slide also. So do we reduce the RT fractionation if the intention of treatment is curative intent RT? Or number 2, do we interrupt curative intent adjuvant or definite thoracic RT? My radiation oncology colleagues can just take that question in any one of them. Like Nidhi madam or...
Yeah, after the COVID pandemic, the fractionation has been changed, and especially when the patients are being treated with the palliative intent, hypofractionation is being done anyways for palliative cases, and in pandemic times, we are definitely sticking to that. And do we interrupt curative intent adjuvant? It would depend upon the condition of the patient. If he is able to tolerate, if the lung is very bad and he needs admission and he needs definitive treatment for COVID at that point of time, the interruption would be there definitely. But if he's not having much symptoms, then we may continue the curative treatment without giving a break.
Thank you
That
so
is what
much.
we have been practicing.
Yeah, I think you have hit the nail on the head directly, and the answer is very well taken, and the take-home message is appropriate. So we have 10 more minutes, and therefore I'll quickly run through the slides. Next slide. Next slide. So the CT chest in the pulmonary anemia on 23rd of July actually showed that the viral pneumonia was improving and it was negative for pulmonary thromboembolism. So the patient was gradually improving and coming out of the COVID. Next slide. So now, Sadashivudu sir, pan-negative non-small cell lung cancer, PDL1 is 30%, and the patient's COVID is recovering or still on the verge of or not fully recovered. Now, do we give cytotoxic chemotherapy? If yes, then which one do we choose? Because this patient is EGFR negative, ALK1 negative, ROS FISH negative, PDL1 30%.
Yes, actually the PDL1 is 1 to 50%. We can give the chemotherapy plus immunotherapy. But here is, I think the problem here is, I think the patient is recovering from the COVID now. So whether we can give the immunotherapy or not is a big issue at this moment, because COVID time, I think most of the guidelines, medical oncology guidelines, they said immunotherapy can hold for some time. I think here I think we can give the chemotherapy in a safer way. Especially pemetrexed-based chemotherapy, it will not cause major bone marrow suppression or febrile neutropenia. In my opinion, I think simply we can go ahead with the chemotherapy. And immunotherapy, I think still I am a little bit concerned about that during COVID time, especially this patient is recovering from the COVID now. So,
right. So, Dr. Anushil Munshi or Sandeep Ganguly, can you just, would you like to order some other additional investigations before we jump on to some treatment, or what are your thoughts? Anyway, I think Sadashiv sir gave a very nice answer that it's better to tilt on chemotherapy side rather than jump on immuno-oncology molecule. Anushil sir or Sandeep Ganguly sir. Okay, next slide. So we have Ullas Batra here now, and who is like very keen into immuno-oncology molecules, be it especially lung cancer. So Ullas, what about immuno-oncology molecule in this patient, like durvalumab, atezolizumab, or which one do we do, or shall we order additional tests before jumping onto an immuno-oncology molecule?
Satya, what I would do in this patient is that initially when we
Okay,
ordered a biopsy,
money is not a constraint.
Yeah, I know. It's your patient, Satya. How can money be a concern? So what I will do in this patient is I would have sent for is an ex-smoker. I would have sent for an NGS at the time of initiation. At the time of when he was diagnosed with COVID, so it will take at least 10 days for him to become non-COVID, and then 7 more days to recover from there. By the time the NGS report would have come, if the NGS report showed some targetable gene, I would have gone ahead with that. Otherwise, if it shows still wild type, in this particular patient, because he had a CT grade 4 pneumonitis, I would like to start with only a single agent pembro, a single agent pemetrexed. In the second cycle onwards, I will do a CT scan to see whether the pneumonitis has resolved. There is no steroid requirement, and I can add pembrolizumab. This data which has shown, and we ourselves have given 7-8 people immunotherapy post-COVID, there is no increased chances of any complications post-COVID. At least till now I haven't really faced anything.
Right. So next slide, please. So in fact, in this patient, we did think of ordering the next slides and next slide, because question 7A, 7B, and 7C talk about the immuno-oncology molecule. I think in the chat box also we have Rangarao sir and Madam Smruti telling us that immuno-oncology molecules can probably be safely used based on the data we have, even in the COVID pandemic era. Next slide. So this patient did get additional tests done in the form of a next generation sequencing. Next slide. And so we have various investigations to do. The MRI spine on 28th of July actually showed involvement of D4, D6, and L1. in addition to the previous 3 bone lesions we had, next slide. So there was some element of progression happening, though his back pain reduced a lot. In addition, the GGOs in the lung reduced, but there was development of pulmonary thromboembolism. Next slide. Which was effectively managed. Now we have various investigations like say Paradigm, Foundation 1, CMI, next slide. Or it could be like say BGS Antis, next slide. And then we have, next slide, we have also liquid biopsies available which are US FDA approved, and also the Oncomine DX target test, next slide. So this is the liquid biopsies recently approved, next slide. So my question to Shyam Agarwal sir is, sir, how do you choose now, because Ullah said that he would like to get the NGS done before jumping on an immuno-oncology molecule in this particular patient. So how do we decide which test do we use for that particular patient? How do we
So you see,
compare?
the current practice which we have, so kind of changed over is instead of doing sequential testing for EGFR, ROS, and other genes, we started doing NGS for those 5 genes, panel. So which covers, the important ones, although it does miss out a few for which the drugs are available like RET and NTRK and HER2, etc. But I think those 5 genes cover most of them, and the report of that is available in 10 days' time. So I think that is the new change. Instead of doing sequential testing, we are offering NGS for all those 5 genes. And if those 5 genes are negative, then we go in for immunotherapy along with chemo, depending upon the PD-L1 testing. So that's the current thinking which I have at least.
I think very right, sir. And I think that's the most practical way to proceed in the current situation. Next slide. So the patient got the Paradigm test done. Next slide. So we have 2-3 minutes more. Next slide. The Paradigm test showed that the EGFR mutation came positive. The previous slide, please. The previous slide. Yeah. So the EGFR mutation came positive, T75 to E758 deletion. And there was a point mutation as well. And the TMB was 11 mutations per megabase. Next slide. And the PDL1 from this block actually was negative. It was 0%. Next slide. So it implies about, it talks about even heterogeneity. In the meantime, the patient therefore got his PET scan, and again before starting the next treatment, and there was progression of disease. Next slide. So before starting on the EGFR TKI now, because the report came that the deletion was present, we therefore got a PET scan and showing a progression of disease. Next slide. And the next slide. So there's increase in the pleural mets, the lung mets, and the cervical lymph nodes have developed. Next slide. Yeah, the liver lesions also increased. The kidney lesion was stable. Next slide. So now the question comes, some of the bone lesions did regress because of the RT and the denosumab and steroids. Next slide, probably. So the question becomes now, how do we choose, next slide, how do we choose with this patient? So any one of the panelists can take this. So now it's EGFR mutant positive non-small cell lung cancer. And the PET scan report shows progression in a month because no effective anti-neoplastic treatment happened during this period. And the COVID part is now completely recovered. Next slide. So how do we choose between the various options we have? Because we have various choices. Are we spoiled, or is it good to have many choices? Any one of the panelists can take this up because we have 2-3 minutes only.
So Datta, EGFR needs to be targeted, and I raised the initial issue of the kidney lesion, which has not been resolved. So it is always better to do a kidney biopsy to see if that is the source of metastasis. Who knows?
Absolutely, sir. So the patient did went on to get osimertinib, but however, next slide. So how, Mullas, can you let me know how do you choose between osimertinib versus a chemotherapy combination? Because we have 2 good trials showing that gefitinib plus pem-carbo actually gives you a very good improvement in the PFS and the OS. And recently we also have the relay trial looking at the combination of Cyramza plus chemotherapy plus EGFR TKI.
I think Satya, in this patient, the choice is very easy. The guy is elderly. His performance status doesn't appear to be very good. He is, I think he has money. So I think I will go for osimertinib in this particular patient. If somebody has brain mets, my choice again becomes very, very simple. I will again go for osimertinib. Probably if it's a young, fitter individual, I would go for probably a second generation TKIs. If Kumar Prabhash is listening in the conference, then I will go for EGFR TKI. Otherwise, I will not go for DGFR TKI plus chemo combo. I would like to go for either third generation or second generation TKIs.
Right.
That's my side of it.
Yeah. So now last part of my talk, the last part of my question now, Sadashivudu sir, next slide. So as Ullas just mentioned, because he said he looked at the brain mets, etc. Next slide. And therefore, since a month had passed and progression happened, we also got his MRI brain done because we know 24% of advanced EGFR mutant positive lung cancer patients can have brain mets. Next slide. And more so with exon 19 deletion than with L858R. Next slide. And the MRI brain report actually showed 6 brain metastases.
Wow.
Sadashivudu sir,
Sir,
how does your choice become more easy?
yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, sir. We can go for the osimertinib, but it has some. Yeah, osimertinib. I'll prefer osimertinib, sir.
So,
Hello?
so Agarwal sir, just one last point now. Next slide. In the meantime, the patient also got the liquid biopsy done. Next slide. And the biopsy report actually showed that there was the E19 deletion. In addition, there was also TP53 mutation. Agarwal sir, your comments on concurrent existence of TP53 with the EGFR deletion?
I don't know. KRAS, there is some data to say patients may not respond that well. I don't know if there's an interaction between P53. This patient has to go for the EGFR target.
Yeah, so this patient did went on osimertinib, and to conclude the case, next slide. When we got his PET scan done again, the MRI brain showed a very good regression of all the enhancing lesions. In fact, there were no brain lesions at all. Next slide. But the whole body PET scan after 4 weeks of osimertinib actually showed progression of disease in multiple lymph nodes and new bone metastasis. Next slide.
And no change in the kidney lesion, see?
Yeah, it has been the same.
I'm making that point from the very beginning. Boss.
You're concentrating on kidneys.
Oh, come on. That's going to explode. So that will explode at some point in time.
Yeah,
So
I think
be
you're
careful.
right, sir.
I think sir is very right in
Yes, sir.
point.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Lesion from the first slide, he has been pointing out at that. And that's an important take-home message to do biopsy the kidney lesion as well, because you might have ended up having a left-sided RCC with bone metastasis. In fact, these patients had multiple bone mets and cervical nodes. So with that, I close my case with the last slide. Next slide. And that tells you about mechanisms of EGFR. Next slide, please go rapidly. The case is almost over. Next slide. Next slide. The new lesions there. Next slide, the new lesions. And this is the mechanisms for osimertinib. So lastly, Ullas, can you end by looking at EGFR TK has failed, IMpower 150. Would you prefer that combination in this patient now because the patient still wants to fight the disease?
Like to do a biopsy for it to look at the MET amplification. If that is positive, I will enroll him into the Savannah study, which is going on all across the India. At 72, 73, IMpower 150, I am not very happy with that.
Very nice.
Yes, toxicity will be too much. And one more point, there was a paper presented in this year's ASCO or AACR which said P53 mutations along with ALK and EGFR both are associated with a bad prognosis, and that is probably why your patient did not respond. Also, do a biopsy from here to rule out any granulomatous diseases or something, just to make sure there is differential. That's what I would do.
All
Dr.
the
Satish
points
sir
have
and
been
Dr.
well
Ullas sir,
covered.
I think
Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
done
you.
with my case. Thank you, Vinayak.